like we have the numbers going up just a little bit more here. Looks like it's starting to level out a little bit more now. So now is probably a great time to get started. And once again, thank you all so much for joining us. And tonight we are going to be talking about preparing for an interview with a college coach and how to make a lasting impression as a potential student athlete. For those who may have not seen me before, maybe it's the first time you are joining a webinar with us. My name is Mike. I'm a senior recruiting analyst here at SportsRecruits. Been at SportsRecruits since 2019. I've had the opportunity to work with a large number of student athletes and their families who are navigating the recruiting process. So what my role specifically is to help people who may have not gone through it before, who are looking for that extra push, that extra additional support when it comes to the process as a whole. And one of my favorite things I get to do in my role is actually prepare the student athletes I work with for interviews that they have scheduled with the college coaches on their list. So that's why I'm really excited to go over this topic. I'm hoping that some of you who are in this meeting here tonight actually may have a meeting coming up at some point in the near future, or you're in the process of potentially trying to get to that next step, because usually it's a pretty good indicator that a coach is interested in you if they do want to talk to you in a one-on-one environment. So in terms of what we are going to talk about tonight, we're first going to start off with why interviews are important and how they can kind of paint the picture for how the rest of the process is going to go with that particular program. We're then going to talk about the keys to a successful interview, whether that be in person, on a video call, and we'll just talk a little bit about how it might be from a phone call perspective as well. And then we're going to go through the questions that you can expect from a college coach and also the questions that you can ask college coaches as well. That's probably one of the more typical missing pieces that people typically don't prepare for when it comes to getting ready for meetings like this. Of course, college coaches want to learn more about you, but this is your opportunity to also get a better understanding of what the program that you're speaking to has to offer, so you can find out if it is a good fit or not for you. And then, as always, we always leave time at the end of our webinars to have a Q&A portion. So if anyone does have any questions at any point during tonight's presentation, feel free to utilize the chat box or the Q&A box. Write it right in there. I'll make sure to get to as many of those as I possibly can once we get towards the end of tonight's meeting. So I won't waste any more time. We'll get right into it, and we'll talk first about why interviews are important. Like I was saying at the beginning of tonight's call, this is really your chance to make that lasting impression with a college coaching staff. This might be the first time that they've really had a chance to see you or hear from you other than an email or seeing you play in person or seeing your highlight video. So this is going to be your chance to really have an opportunity to showcase your personality, showcase your overall professionalism. This is something that could go a really long way. And a lot of you have probably heard that first impressions really could be make or break in a lot of these situations. We don't say that to try and make you more nervous about these potential interviews that you might have, but just understand that it is something that is a very important building block on where that recruiting relationship might go. The other side of it, like I was just alluding to before, it also gives you a chance to evaluate that coaching staff and their program. As much as they're interviewing you, do not lose sight that you are also interviewing this coaching staff at the same time as well. At the end of the day, if you do receive an opportunity to, if you receive an offer from a particular coach or particular program, it's still going to be on you at the end of the day to say yes or no to that. So make sure that when you do have these types of conversations set up, that you're also taking a chance and taking some time to really make sure that you're evaluating what that coaching staff and what that program has to offer for you as well. The other thing as well, particularly if it is the first time that you are speaking with a college coach in one-on-one environment, that's something that we've seen a lot of student athletes get a little bit nervous about. That's nothing to be ashamed of. And that's something that, ultimately it means that you probably care about how the conversation is going to go. So I would say more often than not, that's good news if you are a little bit nervous. The more that you do it, the more comfortable you are going to get in that environment. So if you are in a spot where, that first conversation that you have, maybe it's a school that isn't necessarily in your top 3 or top 5, that's actually something I think is a very great situation to be in, ultimately because it's going to make you more prepared for when those, reach schools, those top level programs on your list that you're most excited about speaking with, you're just going to be more comfortable in that situation. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you get prepared for that. It also is going to allow the coach to see not only your level of preparation, but how serious you are about that program. It's very, very important to make it clear that you've done your research and your homework on this particular school. What is it about that program that made you interested in them in the first place? So they can really get a better understanding of, hey, is this someone who just sent an email that they copy and pasted and sent the same exact message to 25 or 30 different schools? Or is there a legitimate interest in here? Is this someone who really is going to care about the program if they were to come here after they graduate? Last up, it's also going to give you a chance to verify what that next steps are in the recruiting process. And this is something I'm really going to be talking about a lot through the rest of this call. Making sure that when you have these conversations that you make a very clear and have a very clear understanding of where we go from here. That's something that we're going to talk about a lot, and I won't get too much into it right now, but we'll kind of talk about how you can ask that question and why it is important for you to clarify what those next steps may look like after the conversation. Next up, we're going to talk about the keys to a successful interview. And we're going to start off by talking about what you can do in these in-person conversations. So right off the bat, if you're in person, you want to make sure that there's a level of professionalism that you're bringing to these conversations. If you're in person, you're most likely going to be on that school's campus. Typically, sometimes there might be coaches that actually tell you a specific dress code that they expect. If that's not the case, I usually say business casual is a good place to start. But if you're not sure if that's going to work, there might be a shirt and tie for guys. It might be a little bit more upscale. Understand that that's something that you could ask the coaching staff that ends up being the case ahead of time if you feel comfortable. So you want to dress well. You want to make sure you arrive early. You don't want to be on time. You want to arrive early. College coaches, any coaches, honestly, typically are going to be very aware of the time. So that's talk about a bad first impression. If you show up late to your first meeting, not going to be the best way to kind of get your conversation started. And again, make sure you have a list of prepared questions to ask on your end as well. You also want to make sure if there are parents or guardians with you in these one-on-one conversations, we want our parents to take a little bit of a step back in these situations, right? We want to make sure that the student athlete is the one really at the forefront of the conversation, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's the person who's going to end up competing for that program if you end up accepting a commitment from them down the road. So of course, we understand parents are going to want to get some questions answered on their end. Understand that time will happen, especially if it's the first time you're reaching out to the coaching staff. Make sure that you give the student athlete the opportunity to really take the floor and kind of make that work for themselves at the start. Maybe there's a chance, a lot of coaches will typically even say, hey, if your parents are there, I understand that they're here right now. If they want to jump in, if they want to come into my office and they want to talk for a few minutes, that's something that's totally acceptable as well. So just make sure if you're not sure kind of where it started and you're the one who is going to have that first conversation, that you are at the forefront and you're not looking at your parent to speak on your behalf. Again, being yourself, making sure that you're comfortable in that environment. It's okay to be a little bit nervous, but usually what happens for a lot of the athletes that I work with, at least, is as soon as the conversation gets going, you start talking about what type of student athlete you are, and any big games that you may have played in recently. Maybe you talk about the program and, what it is that gets you excited about being a potential option for them. Usually you'll just get more and more comfortable in that conversation as time goes on. So even if you're nervous right at the beginning, just stay the course, stick to it. I promise it's going to get a lot easier and you're going to feel a lot better, like a weight off your shoulders by the time the conversation is over. Eye contact is something that we preach a lot. You want to make sure that you're giving them the direct focus. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not looking at your phone or looking at anything else and that you look preoccupied with anything else that might be going on. Direct, active listening is something that any college coach is really going to expect when they have conversations like this. I also think it's important, depending on where you are in the process, maybe if you're a little bit later on, end of junior year, start of senior year, depending on kind of where the conversation is, having potential requested paperwork accessible. This could be your academic transcript, your test scores. Some schools maybe even ask for, a little bit more info on kind of like how you're doing this season, your upcoming schedule, perhaps. There's a lot of different things that coaches could expect. Try and get a better sense of what they might look for in the beginning, but I think at least having that academic information available is definitely going to be a good idea. You also want to make sure that it's not a one-sided conversation, right? You want to ask the questions. You want to be able to kind of get a better understanding. Even if they say, hey, we're going to leave you for some time to ask questions at the end, feel free to answer one of their questions with a question on your end as well. And that's something we can get into a little bit later on too. And last up, the last two here, I think are supremely important. Establishing those next steps. Where do we go from here? Coach, I really appreciated for the opportunity to speak with you here today. It was so awesome learning about your program. But I just want to clarify what exactly you need from me moving forward here and to find out, just to get a better understanding of how I can best set myself up for success with your program. That is honestly the most crucial part of the interview, in my opinion, because you want to understand what exactly they need from you to take that next step, right? If you're not sure where you end up, I feel like there's just not as much value in the conversation overall. So if you only have time to ask one question, make sure that's the first thing that you do, and also follow up, right? You're always going to have a chance to send an email, send a text, however that conversation was happening prior to you visiting the school for the first time. Coach, thank you so much for the opportunity. This was an incredible experience. I really look forward to continuing to learn more about the program and following along. Please let me know if there's anything else on my end that will be helpful in your process moving forward. That's all. And that's it. That's really the most important steps, everyone. So, like I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to continue to utilize the chat in the Q&A box. But these are some of the most important keys to a successful interview, particularly when you are in person. When we get into the video call side of things, you're going to see a lot of similarities, right? We still want you to dress relatively professional. We want you to be early, and we want you to have those lists of prepared questions. We want you to make sure that you're the one at the forefront of the interview. So if mom and dad are with you, make sure you're the one directly sitting in the middle rather than having mom or having dad being the one kind of at the forefront of the conversation. We still want you to be yourself. We still want you to have that paperwork accessible, and we still want you to be actively listening. We understand that if it's a Zoom meeting, you can have other windows open up. You can have your text coming up on the side of the screen. Understand that the moment that those coaches get a better sense that you're whatever you're focusing on is somewhere else, that's just typically not going to be a good situation. It's going to be tough to come back from something like that. Turning on Do Not Disturb is something that I would highly recommend before any of these meetings, whether it be a video call or a phone call. Again, cannot stress this enough, establishing those next steps, right? Where do we go from here? I want to make sure that I'm doing everything in my power that I'm setting myself up for success with your program. And we already stressed the follow-up aspect of things, right? We want to make sure that it's very clear what you need to do next, and that you also are very appreciative of them giving up their time. College coaches are very busy people. They don't meet with every potential recruit that is interested in them. So again, the fact that they kind of took that next step with you, whether you end up going to that school or meeting with that coach again, make sure that you're super appreciative of their time, because it is something that could be difficult for them to find that time again later on. All right, next up, we're just going to talk about the questions to prepare for from a college coach and some typical responses that you might be able to see. So here's just some of the popular ones. And again, if people want to people can feel free to take a screenshot of this as it's on the screen right now, but I'm also going to send everyone the recording tomorrow at some, within 24 hours, I would say. But a couple of things that they might want to reach out to about, right? What is it about our program that interested you? What do you think you can contribute to our team that we might be missing right now? And a big one that comes up a lot, and I spend a lot of time on this with the athletes that I deal with on a daily basis, is trying to navigate and identify what your strengths and weaknesses are as an athlete or even as a student athlete. One of the things that I typically tell people is when that question comes up, start off with your strengths and make sure you're very confident in what your explanation is of what your strengths are. If you're a lacrosse player, coach, I think one of the things that really separate me from other people are, my overall stamina. I think I have excellent conditioning, and I think I'm a natural born leader. Even if it's something, even if it's a situation where we're down a couple of goals and it's the end of the game, I know that I'm going to have the ability to try and keep everyone composed and make sure that we're kind of sticking to that overall goal. When it comes to weaknesses, it's okay to identify what a weakness is for you at this point in time, but I think it is supremely important for you to also acknowledge, hey, I understand that this is a weakness for myself, and here's what I am trying to actively do to turn that weakness into a strength, or at least make it less of a weakness overall. Coach, at this point, I'm not really completely satisfied with where my left-handed shot is at this point. But what I've been doing is after practice, I've been trying to just focus an extra 20, 30 minutes, just trying to make it stronger so I get more comfortable by the time the season starts. Something like that is going to showcase that, again, we don't expect anyone to be a perfect athlete, and we don't want anyone to think that they're a finished product. So it's going to show a lot of maturity on your end to evaluate and identify what that weakness is. But if you just know it's a weakness and you're not doing anything about it, not really giving coaches a whole lot to work with. So make sure you keep that in mind too. If a college coach asks about any of your current coaches as it stands right now, understand that that's a way for them to find out how you're going to talk about your coaches. Even if you don't have the best relationship with a high school coach or a club coach, do not speak negatively about them, right? You could always find something that you appreciate. They keep us working hard. They try and really get the most out of us. They make sure that when we get to the end of the game, the extra conditioning we do is something that's going to make us more prepared than the other people in our conference. You can get creative with these types of questions. So understand that that's something that, again, it's not necessarily a trap, but it is something that gives coaches an indicator where if you had a bit of a back and forth with a coach and it wasn't always the most positive experience, they want to know that they have someone that they can trust and have direct respect with, even if you had disagreements at some point during your time with them. We talked about all the academic information. We talked about, trying to showcase a time where you've demonstrated leadership. Coaches typically are looking for people who are natural born leaders. that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the motivational speaker type of leader, right? Maybe it's someone who has a chance to lead by example. If you have been identified as a captain for any of the teams that you're a part of, that's always a great thing to identify. And again, coaches typically going to give you a chance to ask any questions that you have as well. And if anyone wants to go over any of these particular questions, again, utilize that chat and Q&A box. And then last up, before we get to the Q&A, questions to ask a college coach. And again, this is especially important because this is going to give you a chance to get a better understanding of what this program is all about. One of the indicators and one of the biggest things I tell the families and student athletes that I work with is you don't want to ask a question that could be easily found in research with a simple Google search, right? You don't want to say, hey, coach, what was your record last year? You don't want to say, when's the last time you guys won your conference? This is all information that's easily accessible on your end, right? So only ask questions that can only be answered by someone who has a direct knowledge of the program. You could even ask them specifically, what do they like about the school? What is the difference between in-season versus out of season when it comes to practice? What's the academic support for the student athletes on campus? And, do you have a good relationship with the academic advisors and the professors, when it comes to the athletes? You can see a list of all the other ones here. Again, we want to make sure that last question that you're going to ask, no matter what are those next steps. But again, anything that really is going to showcase interest in kind of what gives you a better idea of if this place is going to be a good fit for you or not, right? You want to make sure that you're asking about things that really are going to be related to being on the team or being a part of the school community more than anything else. I wouldn't necessarily say, I'll go out of my way the first time I'm meeting a coach and say, oh, hey, where do people go out? How do people try and have fun around here? That just shows that you might have other things on your mind rather than having a positive impact on that team. That might be a conversation you can have later on with maybe one of the athletes if you have more of a direct visit that way. But understand, meeting with the coach for the first time, it's an opportunity for you to get a better understanding of, can I see myself attend this school and call this place my home for the next 4 to 5 years for the most part. So again, feel free to screenshot this. If you didn't have a chance to do so just yet, just take a look at the recording tomorrow. I'd be happy to make that available to you then. All right, everyone. So just to kind of recap everything that we've gone over so far, right? We've talked about the importance of interviews and why they're, a very integral part of the recruiting process as a whole. We talked about, different ways that you can make sure that you are going to be as prepared as possible, the types of questions you can expect from the college coaching staff, and also the types of things that you can ask on your end as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. It looks like we have a couple of questions that have piled in. Feel free to continue doing those. We have about 10 minutes or so that I can answer these questions for you guys. So again, thank you all so much for giving me a chance to go through that. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so the first one that I see here is, what's the best way to handle the question when a coach asks if you're looking at other schools? This is an excellent question that comes up a lot. And I think what it comes down to, a coach is just trying to get a baseline of what type of interest you're receiving from other places. I think it's especially important to identify schools that are pretty similar in overall level of competition, right? You don't necessarily have to go out of your way and say that, like, their 3 closest rivals are also looking at you, but making sure that you're being honest about the schools, because again, coaches run in small circles, right? If you just throw out a name of a school that you haven't had any direct communication with, they're going to be able to find out if that's the case very quickly. So just be completely honest when it comes to that question, but you definitely want to make sure that you are explaining schools, particularly that are pretty similar. If you're at, a high academic D3 school, chances are you're talking to other high academic D3. So those would be the types of places that I would recommend including when they ask a question like that. Someone compared preparing for an interview for college coach like to a job interview. And I think that's a great way to look at it, right? It essentially is a job interview from a standpoint of when you are a student athlete, regardless of division, once you get to the college level, it essentially becomes a job in a lot of ways, right? It's a extreme time commitment. It's going to put you in a situation where you're surrounded by a lot of people from different backgrounds, different walks of life. It is going to be a job in a lot of ways. In some instances, it might even be more of a time commitment, depending on the level and conference and division that you might be going to. So I think that's a really thoughtful and good way to consider what these college coach interviews look like for sure. Let's see. Looks like we have a ton coming more in here, guys. And again, thank you so much for your feedback. Let's see. So someone reached out and said, should club players discuss their experiences on their high school team or just stick to club? I think that's that's more of a personal question than anything, which is totally fine. But just understand that it really comes down to one, how competitive the teams that you're on are more than anything else, and maybe how that coach even found out about you, right? There's a good amount of sports out there. Generally speaking, the club side of things tends to be a little bit more competitive compared to high school. So chances are the conversations you're going to have are going to be about that. But if you are, again, if you are a team captain on your high school team, if there's a certain statistic or metric that comes up, that you receive from the high school season, you don't think that you necessarily have to pretend like the high school team doesn't exist. But I think it definitely skews towards the team, that is more competitive or does have more people who are interested in competing at the collegiate level, for sure. All right. Let's see. Looks like we have a couple of repeats here, everyone. Just going to try and make sure that we try and find all of the new ones. Ooh, so I see a couple people have asked about how to handle receiving an offer during one of these types of conversations. And that's a great question. And that's something that comes up a lot. So, and one person in particular asked about the timeline that you can have when it comes to being able to commit to the school or end up saying no for, because you're focused on other opportunities. I think when you receive an offer and you're not necessarily ready to say yes right off the bat, which I would say for a majority of people is the case, the way that I would recommend responding to something like that is, coach, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm thrilled to even be considered for a program like yours. But as I'm sure you understand, this is a very big decision. And this is something that I definitely want to make sure I talk over with my family. Do you have a timeline on when you expect an answer from me? Because I don't want to hold you up, but I want to do everything I can in my power to make sure that, I give you a response in a timely manner. That's the type of response that I would recommend in that way. I think it's especially important for you to, understand that you want to respect their timeline, but at the same time, you don't want to feel rushed into a decision or feel like that you got, you said yes just because you didn't feel like you wanted to disappoint the coach or something along those lines. So, make sure that you take your time with it unless you're 100% sure going into that interview. Look, if this coach gives me an offer, I'm going to say yes because it's my number one option. Try and get a better sense of what that timeline looks like. And usually coaches are going to be pretty upfront about that with you. They might say, hey, look, take your time. We're at the beginning stages of this. Just, let's just make sure that we kind of stay in touch. We'll touch base in a couple of weeks. Where I've seen other student athletes that I've worked with get something along the lines of, hey, look, this is the situation, but we have 3 spots left in our team. We just offered 5 other kids, and the first 3 to say yes are going to be the ones who get the roster spots. It really just comes down to where exactly they are in the process and, where exactly you kind of fall in line when it comes to how they feel about you is, in terms of the pecking order, where exactly you stand. So just keep that in mind. And again, it's totally okay. And you're totally within your right to not say yes right off the bat. So don't feel pressure that you have to do so. Let's see. I think we talked about other offers a little bit already. Let's see. Someone asked, when should I start to talk and interview with coaches? This is a really good question. For the most part, this is typically going to be, once you get past a Division I level after that contact date. So that's typically going to be September 1st or June 15th after going into your junior year, I should say. Typically, that's when those in-person conversations or one-on-one conversations are going to happen because there's limitations prior to that at the D1 and D2 level. Now, D3 doesn't necessarily have those same rules and regulations. So a 2026 right now could have a conversation with a college coach at the D3 level. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen for everybody, right? So, I would say you can get to the point where you can start requesting those types of conversations. It wouldn't be the first thing that I ask when I'm reaching out to a coach, right? If you're someone who's a 2026 or a 2027, that you're most likely at the beginning stages of trying to instill that recruiting relationship. So I would say give it a little time. Only request a phone call or only request an in-person interview if you're at the point where you're pretty confident this is the place where you want to go. You've made it very clear that this is a place that you're very interested in, and you feel like the clock is ticking a bit and you kind of want to just get an answer on, hey, am I someone that you are considering at this point? So if you're at the beginning stages, I would not recommend reaching out and asking for a phone call right off the bat. Okay, looks like we have time for a couple of more here, guys. We talked about kind of receiving offers. Hopefully that was a helpful response. Someone asked, is it okay to ask a coach how long they have been at the school and what their strategy is for developing a certain position? Absolutely. Again, that might be something that you could even do some research on, because typically if you go on a staff directory website and you click on the coach, it may even give you a background of what their history is in terms of their playing career and also what their coaching background is. So if you end up doing some research and seeing that, you can ask, hey, what was it like at insert school? What went into your decision-making process of going from school A to school B? Like, those are the types of things that show that you have done your research and you have done your homework at the same time too. Someone had just asked for clarification. So are you saying junior year may be too late to apply? Is sophomore year the expectation? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying at all whatsoever. I'm just saying typically these types of conversations happen during junior year. I would recommend for those of you who, if you are a junior right now and you haven't started the recruiting process, starting that communication is something that's going to be very important for you, because you want to get in the door with these coaches. You want to give them a chance to make an evaluation. Again, that's not me saying that it's too late, and so you shouldn't even try if you're a junior right now and you haven't started reaching out to college coaches. But it's definitely, if you are someone who is a little bit on the younger side, there definitely is a benefit on starting the process early. If you are starting a little bit late, there is a chance and there is time to catch up, but you want to make sure that you're being proactive and you're not waiting for college coaches to find you. I'm sure there's a lot of people in here who aren't really sure about what to say in that first message when you're contacting a college coach, for the first time. Feel free to go on our website. We have sample emails that you can find when it comes to introducing yourself to college coaches. So, do we have to do interviews and calls? Absolutely not. It's not something that's required by any means. I would say it typically does happen for the schools that you do feel pretty, that schools that do feel pretty good about you. So, if that's something that ends up not being a part of the process, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing by any means, but typically, I would say a large majority of the families that I work with, typically you're going to have a chance to see the campus of the school that you're interested in before you end up going there, which means that you're probably going to have a chance to talk to the coach one-on-one at some point. It may not be set up as a specific interview. It might be more of just like a simple introduction, but I would say it is pretty common for the most part. Someone else reached out and said, look, I'm a quiet guy. Is that something that's going to be looked at negatively from the coach? And no, I don't think that's the case, as long as you are being yourself, right? So I still think you can be quiet, but you can also show that you care about the meeting, right? If you're quiet, you can still have really good, well thought out, pointed questions. You can still have really good responses in terms of, the types of things that you are telling these coaching staffs about. So if you are quiet, I understand this might put you a little bit out of your comfort zone, and you could even, there might even be something that you can say during the conversation. Look, coach, this isn't necessarily my comfort zone here, but I just want to let you know, if I did end up coming to this school, I would do everything in my power to work hard and be the best student athlete that I can. There are ways to kind of still showcase your overall talent and your personality, even if you are someone who is a little bit more on the quiet side. Okay, I think we have time for one more, everybody. Again, thank you all so much for filling out these questions. Hopefully this was helpful information here. And let's just see what else we have. Let's see. Okay, just looking again, just seeing a couple of repeats, everyone. Okay, when should I start? Someone reached out and said, how relevant is this for someone in the class of 2027? It may not be relevant right now, but understand this is something that could end up being part of your process at some point down the road, right? So look, you might not have any direct conversations with college coaches this year or even next year, but this is a presentation that we're going to do multiple times. So if feel free to save this again when we eventually send you the recording, but at the same time, it is something that could be part of a bigger conversation for you down the road as well. So hopefully that's something that's going to make things a little bit easier for you as time goes on. Let's see. Okay, I have one more here. It just made me laugh as I see it came across the screen. If my dad has a big personality, should he tone it down? Look, I'm not going to tell your dad to tone down the overall personality, but again, like I was saying during the presentation, it's important that you are at the forefront of the conversation, right? The college coach has set up this interview, has set up this phone call, has set up this visit because they are interested in you being a potential student athlete for that program. Your guardians will have an opportunity to have these types of conversations with the college coaches, but particularly with the first impression, highly, highly recommend that the student athlete is the one at the forefront of the conversation. So All right, everyone. Unfortunately, I think that is all the time left that we have here, and hopefully there was some valuable information that everyone received from this. Again, you will be receiving a recording from this at some point tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. Again, if you ever have any questions or have anything in particular that you would like us to go over, any topics that you think would be helpful as you navigate through the recruiting process, just reach out to help@sportsrecruits.com, and that's something that we're always going to take into consideration when trying to figure out other topics for webinars that we're going to that we're going to have and that we're going to have our team host down the road. So again, thank you all so much for your time. Really appreciated this. Excellent questions from everyone who wrote into the Q&A box here. And definitely best of luck to all of you who have interviews scheduled, and for those of you who will have them down the road. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks so much for your time. We hope to see you on another webinar sometime soon. Take care.